About once per year, a semi-obscure anime will come out that completely catches everybody off guard. For me in 2024, that was Orb on the Movements of the Earth, coming out in a season with Dandadan, Bleach, and ReZero, and in my opinion, it easily outshined all of those. And this year, among one of the most stacked anime seasons in history, we were blessed with the 6-episode absolute masterpiece that is Takopi's Original Sin. Takopi's Original Sin arguably does more with 2.5 hours of content than pretty much any piece of media I have ever consumed. Now, before I get into talking about the show, I do want to give a trigger warning because this show contains depictions of self-harm and abuse that may be triggering to some viewers. So if that kind of thing is a harsh topic for you, then maybe skip this video. As per usual with videos like this on my main channel, I'm going to be keeping the first half of this video relatively spoiler-free, and then I'll get into more specific things later on. However, there will be spoilers for episode 1 because I can't really explain the plot of the series or what makes it good without getting into some of the grittier details from the first episode. Takopi's Original Sin is about a race of adorable and wholesome aliens called Happians, and their goal is to spread happiness throughout the entire universe. One of these aliens just so happens to crash land on Earth, and after evading capture, he stumbles upon our main character, Shizuka, a 4th grade girl who is clearly shown to be sad even this early on. After Shizuka feeds the hungry alien a piece of bread left over from her lunch, he feels greatly indebted to her and makes it his goal to pay her back for her kindness, having absolutely zero idea about the string of events that will come because of this. Now, I think it's important to mention that each and every episode starts with a trigger warning. So even though the premise seems pretty innocent, and we have this cutesy art style with a cutesy main character, as a watcher, you already know that this is going to turn into something a little more dark. I've seen a lot of people, and I even did the same thing, compared this to Goodnight Poon Poon after the first episode, notoriously one of the saddest and most depressing pieces of media most people have consumed. And although they are very similar, I think a lot of people are misconstruing the show to be one of the most depressing series of all time, and although it does have its fair share of sad moments, where Goodnight Poon Poon and Takopi's Original Sin are very similar is how seriously they take their topics of mental health and trauma, while doing it in a very unorthodox way. So if you're one of those people who is scared to watch it because you've heard people saying, oh, this is the most depressing and sad show I've ever seen in my life, I don't think you need to worry about that. Anyway, moving on, we learn that Shizuka's mom is an escort and her dad has moved far away from her to Tokyo, meaning that Shizuka practically has nobody in her life other than her dog Chappie, who is the one thing that keeps Shizuka happy. However, now she has the newly named alien called Takopi, who she named after an octopus. Takopi has a wide variety of these things called happy gadgets, which allow him to do the smallest things from make somebody fly to literally go back in time. And after days and days of meeting up, Shizuka shows up to Takopi looking very beaten down and dirty, holding the collar of Chappie, her best friend in the whole world and the only thing that's keeping her going, saying that she got in a fight with her friend. And this is where a major idea, as well as the thing that I think makes Takopi's Original Sin so special, comes into play. Because as the audience, we can tell something is not right. Shizuka is absolutely beaten, like there's no reason a kid should ever look this way. But Takopi, being this alien that only knows happiness and doesn't even understand the concept of violence, literally says to her, Shizuka, your face is all decorated. When, as the audience, we can clearly tell something is wrong, first off because she's holding Chappie's collar, and second of all because she has obviously been beaten. Takopi's innocence in the sheer face of this human horror of a child being hurt is something that as the audience makes it just so gut-wrenching to watch. Because you see, in a show where there's no shortage of horrific things happening all the time, what's even worse than the actual events happening as the audience is watching the way that Takopi will react to those things. Because he's so wholesome, as the audience, you don't want him to be exposed to these things, while at the same time kind of hoping that these things happen to him so that he can begin to learn about the horrors of humanity. And you're just left with this insanely conflicting feeling that sometimes is even harder to deal with than some of the more crazy things that go on. And that feeling is made all the more gut-wrenching when Takopi offers a happy device, an unbreakable ribbon that when tied to two people will undoubtedly make them make up. Now you see, Happians have a rule. They're not allowed to let humans use the gadgets on their own, but Shizuka asks Takopi if she can take the ribbon for herself and take her time using it in order to make up with her friend. Takopi, thinking this is the best way to make Shizuka happy, which is his whole goal, gives her the ribbon, and then he waits. And he keeps waiting for her to come back. And she never does. And that's when Takopi goes to her house and sees this.
Shizuka-chan? 何やってるんだっぴ？そのリボンは柱に結びつけてもしょうがないっぴよ。死んだ？なんで？ なんで
This scene is an extremely tough watch. Of course, because of the nature of the situation going on, that's always going to be uncomfortable, but what makes it all the more uncomfortable is the way that Takopi is unable to grasp the seriousness of the situation going on. You see, self-harm and suicide are not concepts that exist where Takopi is from, and it's only after a heartbreaking 2 minutes of anime that Takopi finally understands that Shizuka took her own life. He pulls out a happy gadget he has, a camera that allows him to go back in time to the point in which his picture was taken. Takopi then makes it his goal to save Shizuka and to figure out why a human would take their own life. So Takopi goes back in time, and then he starts to stick around with Shizuka, and we start to learn a little bit more about her and why she's having such a hard time, particularly because of one single girl named Marina, one of her fellow classmates. You see, Marina seemingly bullies her to no end, and with seemingly no reason, doing anything she can to make Shizuka's life a living hell. And again, as the audience, you instantly hate this character, like Griffith levels of hatred towards this character you gain as an audience member, because she does so much. Takopi has a gadget that lets him turn into anyone and look just like them, and one day Marina tells Shizuka to meet her out back outside of the school, and Shizuka, being absolutely terrified to go outside, allows Takopi to take her place and disguise himself as Shizuka. And I haven't said it yet, but by the way, this character Takopi needs to be protected. Like, I would absolutely do some of the most heinous things just to see this character be happy, which is what makes it all the much worse when he has to deal with some of the abuse that Shizuka does on a daily basis. And on top of that, having absolutely no reason or understanding of why it's happening or what is going on. But it's in this interaction that we realize just why Shizuka is being bullied so hard, and it's because of her mom being a prostitute. You see, Marina's dad is one of the clients of Shizuka's mom, which, as you could imagine, causes a great rift in between Marina's parents. And Marina takes out all that anger on Shizuka because from Marina's perspective, the only reason that Shizuka's mom needs to do this and in turn tear apart her family is because she needs to provide for Shizuka. And at first glance, you might think, well, that's really stupid and that's super unreasonable, and some people might even think that's unrealistic, but then when you take a step back and kind of look at it from a different perspective, it's not unrealistic at all for a child to lash out on the one person who they can pinpoint their trauma to, because Marina can't take it out on her parents, she can't take it out on Shizuka's mom, so she just naturally takes it out on Shizuka. And for the most part, the whole episode is just Takopi going back and forth trying to figure out ways to make Shizuka happy and have her and Marina get along. And I specifically remember messaging my friends while watching this first episode and saying I would curb stomp Marina if I saw her in real life. But then this scene happens.
お夕飯あの人と食べるそうだからマリちゃんももう少し早く帰ってくれればいいのに
And you see, it's stuff like this that is this show's biggest strength. Because as the show goes on, and even throughout the first episode, you see some of these kids, these children who are supposed to be the most pure and innocent form of a human, do horrible things. A lot of things that people would consider irredeemable. But everybody has their own reason, and I really appreciate that their trauma isn't used as an excuse, but it's more just used to show just how bad trauma can get and the events it can lead to if left unchecked. Whether it's your parents being absent, and being relentlessly bullied at school, whether it's being abused by your parents, or whether it's even having too much pressure put on you. Every single situation of trauma we see in this series is handled with an equal level of respect, which I think is beautiful, because no matter how severe your trauma is compared to somebody else, most people, including myself, can relate to these extreme cases and what they turn into, even if you haven't necessarily been through the same thing. We oftentimes fall into the trap of thinking that our issues aren't as hard as other people's, therefore we can't take them seriously. But this series shows the wide spectrum of different types of trauma or bad situations you can be in, and then treats them all completely serious, even if some situations might not be as bad as others. And I think that message right there, the fact that everybody's trauma matters, is such an important thing, especially for people in our day and age. And that's really it for the spoiler-free section. However, I do want to talk about the production values of this show because it has some of the best animation I've ever seen, with one of the more more unique art styles in all of anime. It's animated by a new up-and-coming studio called Inashia, who you might know from animating the new remake of Spice and Wolf, and they cared so much about keeping the original story alive that they were willing to release this series as an ONA and not allow it to air on TV just so that they could keep the same level of seriousness when it comes to these topics. And I think that's such a big thing, especially when it comes to Japanese companies. And like, some of the scenes in later episodes are just genuine 10 out of 10 masterpieces of a scene. And in general, I just think this series is like a must watch for anybody who likes anime and can handle the topics at hand. But that's pretty much it for the spoiler free section. Now, because this is a second channel video for me and I don't really script these and I kind of just go off the cuff, I'm not going to be able to get as deep into the themes as I want to get, but I'm going to try my best to just talk about how much some of these scenes and the message behind the entire series means to me. So let's go. If you're watching this part of the video, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that you've seen the entire series, and I just want to talk about how absolutely insane the ending of episode 2 was. Watching Takopi just not know what to do when he's watching Marina just slowly beat down Shizuka after he figured out why Shizuka had taken her own life, only to run at her with the happy camera and smack it against her head and kill her. That was just like one of the most jarring and just jaw-dropping scenes I have seen in anime in years. Because just no matter how many twists and turns this series takes, you never know which direction it's going. Which leads me to episode 3, where Azuma walks up on Shizuka and Takopi and realizes that they killed Marina. And at first he's telling them they need to turn themselves in, he's telling them about how wrong they are. And then this is when we start to see glimpses of Shizuka becoming a bit of a manipulator. Now, I don't know if she's doing this on purpose or if it's a subconscious thing, but Shizuka's mom is an escort. She clearly grew up seeing her mom use herself to manipulate men into doing things so that she can survive, and we start to see Shizuka do the same thing to Azuma, as she convinces Azuma to help them hide the body. And I think a lot of people, including even myself when episode 3 came out, were a little bit confused at why this kid would so easily help them hide the body of another person in his class. Like, he practically just gets hard eyes because he's attracted to Shizuka and then right away starts to help them. And for some people that might be a little bit immersion breaking. That is, until we get Azuma's backstory and we finally start to understand him a little bit. You see, Azuma is the child of a family who owns a clinic. His older brother Junya is the smartest kid in the entire county, getting all 100s on every single test, and his mother holds him to that same bar, the whole time with the promise of pancakes once he finally reaches those same heights. You see, it's not the pancakes themselves that Azuma wants, but those pancakes, that reward that has been dangled in front of his face yet taken away at every single turn, even though Azuma still does good and gets 85 to 90% on his tests. Those pancakes represent that he was finally not disappointing his mother, that he was finally reaching that same bar that his brother had set for him. And because of all this pressure that Azuma's mother has put on him, and even Azuma himself has put on him, leads him to look at his brother like this goal, like this absolute god and this untouchable being, and he doesn't really even treat him like his brother. And I think this is such a realistic take on having too many expectations. And it's the fact that he was never able to live up to somebody's expectations, that he's not needed by anybody because his brother's going to be smart enough to take over the clinic, that his mom is disappointed in him, that when Shizuka finally tells him, "I need you, Azuma, I need you to help me bury this body." Shizuka, by the way, a girl who looks just like his mother, he just couldn't say no. Not only that, he was excited to finally be wanted, to finally be needed. And again, like I was saying earlier, it's the seriousness in which the situation is portrayed when there are arguably much worse things going on, like they didn't kill a child last episode, that I just appreciate so much. Because children are very fragile and moldable creatures. Like, it only takes the smallest amounts of trauma to make them do some really crazy and insane things. And watching this series and watching these kids try and get away with this murder, along with Takopi, who's even more innocent than a child, makes it give off the same feeling as when you're watching like a murder documentary and you're confused at how these insane kids would rationalize just killing somebody, but it's through a show like this that you can really begin to understand. And maybe my favorite scene in the entire series comes in episode 4 when Azuma starts to break down. Marina's body has been found in the woods, and now it's not very unrealistic for our main cast of characters to be caught in this scheme. Shizuka, figuring out that they're probably going to be caught, looks at Azuma and tells him, "Turn yourself in for me." And for the first 6 or 7 minutes of the episode, we watch as Azuma slowly breaks down. In one of the best showings of a mental breakdown I've seen in anime, and that's when we're given a scene of Azuma's mom finally giving him those pancakes. And after like 7 minutes of breakdown, we're given this colorful and beautiful plate of pancakes, symbolizing that Azuma's mom understands he's going through a hard time, that she's there for him. She says, "You're going through a rough time, I can tell. You've been working super late, staying up all night." And Azuma finally begins to feel a little bit of peace. He even gets very close to telling her about the whole situation, and that's when his mom says, "No, I've given up on you. It's clear you're not going to be able to meet my expectations, so I'm not going to hold these pancakes away from you anymore, because you're not even worth worrying over." And that's when they turn the pancakes from this beautiful piece of hope that we've seen into this gross and disgusting looking plate of pancakes, because it was never the pancakes he wanted. The pancakes weren't even good, but it was just that validation he wanted. And again, I think some people might feel like this expectation from his parents are unrealistic, but I just have to disagree. It is such a realistic thing, and I think a lot of people probably related to Azuma and his story more than any other character in this series. And I think this scene is one of the best showcases of mental health and just like trauma I've ever seen. It's like so well done. I also want to talk about a scene in the final episode where Shizuka finally breaks down. You see, throughout the entire series, Shizuka has been this very monotone and pretty emotionless character. She says some pretty crazy things, talks about killing her dad's daughters, and does it all in a very calm and monotone voice. We've never seen Shizuka be overtly emotional, even when she was going to end everything for herself. She said it behind a smile with a very calm attitude, which makes it all the more devastating when Shizuka finally breaks down to Takopi. This scene encapsulates the message behind the entire story of Takopi very well. After being attacked by Shizuka in Tokyo, Takopi finally finds her again. She tells him to move out of the way. She needs to go find Chappie. And Takopi refuses, telling her, "Shizuka, I don't want you to make other people sad. I don't want you to make yourself sad. You're gonna make me sad." And this is the first instance of Shizuka and Takopi actually talking about their feelings. And that's when Shizuka begins to absolutely break down. This entire series, she's been this emotionless void because of all of her trauma. She's never even said how she felt, only dealt with it silently. And that's when we're given a minute and 15 seconds of some of the best voice acting you can find in anime, where Shizuka just completely breaks down, begins to cry. "What was I supposed to do when my dad left me, when I couldn't see him when I wanted? What was I supposed to do when my mom stopped coming home? What was I supposed to do when I was relentlessly bullied at school, when my dog was barking too loud and people got mad at me? How am I supposed to handle all of this alone?" And this is where the main message of Takopi's original sin truly begins to show, because Takopi realized he never tried to talk to Shizuka about any of these things. Maybe all of this could have been prevented if instead of just acting on his own, he actually tried to understand her. Instead of trying to fix everything, what if he just had a simple conversation with her? What if he was just there for her because she was lonely? The only thing she had in the world was her dog, who she lost. And everything could have been prevented if only Takopi just tried to hear her out and understand her. And I keep bringing this back to real life, and this is a much more mundane version of this, but I think this even comes down to relationships. Oftentimes, I think when people will come to other people with problems, I find myself doing this sometimes as well, you'll immediately try to fix them. You'll try to find the solution, when in reality, sometimes people just need someone to talk to. They need somebody to validate their emotions or to get their emotions out to. And oftentimes, what's much better than actually trying to find the solution for them is just to be someone that they can talk to. And that's the message that Takopi's original sin leaves with. Now, the end of this series is absolutely beautiful. It left me absolutely crying like a baby. I'm not going to go over those events just because I've kind of already gone over what the message of the story is. But Takopi's original sin is a very rare 10 out of 10 show, one with no boring moments, one that perfectly wraps up the story and gives all of their characters closure, as well as the audience. It's tragic, it's kind of funny at times, and it's absolutely beautiful. And the message behind Takopi's original sin is one that I will remember for the rest of my life. Does happiness come from money? Does happiness come from material items? Does happiness come from accomplishments? Does it come from praise from others? No. In its simplest form, happiness comes from talking. It's such a simple and easy message to understand. It's something that like a 5th grader could probably come up with on their own. Yet it is such an important one because so many people, especially in this age, forget that message. This is a time when we're supposed to be more connected than ever. We have so many means of communication, yet it feels like we're talking less than ever. And when a series like Takopi's Original Sin comes along, creates an extremely captivating narrative, has beautiful animation, and is overall just an amazing story with such a simple yet important message, I think it is generational. I think watching shows like this is why I love entertainment. It's what I love about living. And this series is just one that will never leave me, and one I'm gonna rewatch a million times in the future. If you made it to this point in the video, I appreciate you for watching this far. Like I said a couple times, this is a second channel video, which means it's unscripted, and I kind of just talked into my microphone and tried to make it cohesive. So I'm sure at points I got a little confusing, or even just started rambling. But this is a video that was extremely important to me, and I just had to make it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Peace out.